Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be coloring up these adorable snowbirds using my Olo markers. So this is my part 2 video. If you saw my part 1, which was walking through the Gina K Designs October release, then you caught a sneak peek of this. So this is part 2. The sets that I'm going to be using today is the Winter Tweetings bundle and the Masking Oval Stencil. I'm going to start by stamping out these two birds. This is what I had kind of planned out for my design. I have Express It paper here, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But I'm stamping them in an alcohol-friendly ink. This happens to be Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. It just seems to be a go-to for me, but any type of alcohol-friendly ink will work. Now I need to pick out the colors that I want to use, and this is my color swatches chart from Olo Markers. I downloaded it from their website and colored it in. And yes, I have all of the Olo markers that are available right now, and I like to use this to pick out my colors. So what I really look for is what three colors are kind of next to each other, and that tells me they are going to blend together nicely. Here's a look at the markers that I picked out. You can screenshot this, but I'm also going to have all of these colors listed over on my blog. Thankfully, these images don't have a lot of colors, so it limits the amount of markers that I need to use. Now I can start working on coloring in my image. So I am going to have the colors listed at the very top. I have a 3-color combination. I have a dark, medium, and light. I started with the B 2.6 and kind of went under the rim of the hat because to me that is where a shadow is going to be. And then I blended it out with the remaining colors. Now, for the rest of the bird's body, I kind of think about what is going to be overlapping another image, or, maybe because the bird is facing to the right, that is where the highlight or the light source is coming from. So everything on the left-hand side is going to be just a little bit darker. And I'll use that kind of concept or that frame of thinking when it comes to coloring the rest of the part of this bird, which I'll get to. I just want to go through all of the blues first. So once I finish this one, I'm going to move up to the top and I'm going to do this bird that's kind of facing to the left. So again, I put my darkest color right under the rim of the hat, and then I'm going to blend it out with the remaining colors. I'm trying not to apply too much of the medium and dark color because I don't want that to take over my bird. I want him to be fairly light colored. So I've done a few videos in the past coloring with my Olo markers, and honestly, I am still trying to get used to them. They are just a little bit different than a Copic marker if that is what you're used to. Now, as far as the coloring or where I'm putting the shadows, that can be used regardless of what color medium you're using. But as far as these markers themselves, they are just a whole different type of system. For one, the ink inside of the barrel is a free flow system, meaning it is all ink. In a Copic marker, there's kind of a material in the inside of the barrel that kind of soaks in some of your ink. So you're not getting all of the ink that you put in a Copic marker. Also, the way the ink flows out of the marker tip itself is very different. It comes out pretty quick. I have had some times where it just comes out too quick and my marker tip gets really shiny. And I know when it's getting super shiny, it is going to leak on me or add a little drop to my cardstock that I don't want. So I do keep an eye on my tips. But that's just because there's a lot of ink coming out at that time. So it's something to keep in mind when you're coloring with them. One of the reasons that I have been gravitating more and more towards my Olo markers is I don't have to work so hard when it comes to blending the colors. They do blend really nice. Once in a while, I will go back over the area, but not very often because too much ink onto the cardstock is going to end up making it bleed. If you find that you are bleeding, it's not the marker's fault. A lot of times it's either the cardstock that you're using or the ink that you stamped your image in. Now, I have played with a few different types of cardstocks and a few different types of ink stamping my image, and I keep going back to Express It cardstock. It is a very smooth cardstock. It's very slick, and it blends the ink very nicely. And even though I said it is a really smooth cardstock, I have tried other really smooth cardstocks and I find that I get bleeding with it. So I just seem to keep going back to Express It. It holds the ink really well. I get great blends and I just find I get less bleeding. I also try not to get too close to the lines because sometimes the ink does like to spread. And if I give it just a little bit of room, that I find that it spreads just perfectly to that edge of the line. And I kind of hope that makes sense. When you start playing with the markers, you will kind of discover that. You will find what works for you as far as the cardstock or even as far as how to color it. If I need to get into a really small area, like kind of that edge of the belly there, where there's just a little bit of area for the blue, I will hold my marker almost straight up and down so I can really use the tip of the marker. If I'm holding it kind of more at an angle, like if I was writing with a pen, then I find that I'm getting more of the tip or more of the marker tip, and I end up kind of coloring more of the area that I need to or bleeding. So if you want to get into some fine areas, then you want to hold your marker straight up and down. And that goes for any type of marker that I have used, whether it's the Copic or the Olo markers. The zero marker I use on occasion to kind of help push color back. Like if I found it leaked into an area that I didn't want to, I find that with the zero marker, I can push it back because it's a colorless blender in there. So there's no color, it's straight alcohol. So after coloring, I lined up the coordinating die and die cut out my birds, and now I'm going to work on the tree branch. And here is my trick for getting this perfectly stamped. I started out by die cutting the tree first from white cardstock. For the rest of my cardstock or the rest of my card, I am using the Gina K Designs layering weight white cardstock. Now I have my Misti and I have some grid paper at the bottom, and I'm placing the stamp in there, and I'm going to stamp this tree branch down just on the paper that is in my Misti. That is going to be my guide. Now I'm taking the negative piece of that branch, and I am going to line up the negative piece with the branch that I stamped down. I'm going to hold that down with some Post-it tape, and now I'm bringing in my positive piece, and I'm going to place that right back in there like a puzzle piece. And now I can stamp my tree branch down. What that did is allowed me to kind of move my negative piece around to get a perfectly even white border all the way around the tree branch, especially for something like this where there's lots of little sprigs poking out all over. I found I was struggling trying to die cut it after stamping. This worked out perfect. Now I can work on my background. So I have, again, some layering weight white cardstock from Gina K Designs, and I have it trimmed down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I'm lining up my panel with the etched line on the masking oval stencil, and I'm holding everything down with Post-it tape. By lining it up with those etched lines, it's allowing it to be centered on my card front. I'm going to start by ink blending medium lilac down towards the bottom of the oval. And then I'm going to come in with blue denim at the top. Now, I noticed that my blending brush probably needs to be cleaned because I'm getting some harsh color or some harsh lines from my brush there. What I'm doing to kind of get past that right now is I'm going to ink it up kind of more on the right-hand side of the brush and then tilt my brush to blend that color on. That way I'm not using the bristles that are a little harder. And then hopefully I remember to clean my brush after this. Now I am deepening up the top portion of my oval, and this is going to be using in the navy. Since I'm creating kind of a winter card, I wanted to have some snowfall in the background. And I personally love to add white splatter, which I could do while my mask is still on. But if you don't like splattering, you can use the snowy background from Gina K Designs. I am inking that up with a white pigment ink. And this is kind of backwards than what I've seen most people do. I inked it up and then I'm taking the stamp to my cardstock. If I would have thought this through, I probably would have done the ink blending and everything right in my Misti tool, which I have done before. And then that way I could use my Misti to stamp the background. Doing it this way, it's pretty slippery on top of that masking oval stencil. So I would recommend starting out with your cardstock and your stencil right in your Misti tool. And then that way you can use that to stamp. This all still worked out, but I would have liked my white snowfall to be a little bit brighter, and I wasn't able to stamp it again because I did that freehand. Now I'm taking my panel, I put some foam tape on the back, and I'm placing this on top of powder blue cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. This is one of those do as I say, not as I do. I should have probably added my tree branch before I added my cardstock to the powder blue panel because I needed to trim that tree off a little bit. So I kind of lined it up and trimmed it off by eyeballing it. I just need to make sure that when I attach this to the front of the card, that I'm lining up that slant where I cut it off. I just got to make sure that that lines up with the edge of my card. So again, might want to add your tree branch before adding your panel to a card front. Now, both of the birds and the tree branch, I did die cut out 2 layers from white cardstock just using the die and layering them together. So that way they have a little bit of dimension and stability to them. But because of that, when I go to add the birds on top, I needed to have something in between there. So that's where you can see I'm adding some thin foam squares in between the branches. That way I don't have any sagging areas in there. So I just bring in some large, some small, and placing them where they're going to be hidden behind my bird. Then I can just add liquid glue to the back, and wherever the bird is going to overlap the branch will be attached with liquid glue. I also have the Winter Blessings sentiment that I stamped in black onyx ink and used the coordinating die to die cut it out. Again, I layered it multiple times with white cardstock to give it that dimension. I couldn't resist adding the disco ball sequins, so I'm just adding a few kind of down below and in between. I'm using my Connect glue I have in a fine tip bottle and my pick and stick tool to attach those, and they're just the perfect little shimmery mix to the rest of my card design. And one more finishing touch is I'm taking a white gel pen and I'm just adding a few highlights to the Santa hat and the birds. And that's going to finish off my card project today, coloring in these adorable little birds using my Olo markers. So I hope you found this video helpful. I will have all of my supplies linked down below in the video description and over on my blog. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today, and I will see you again soon in the next video.